Okay, we've been through the fundamentals now of noise-based texturing, had a look at some useful tricks that you can use in the render tree when doing this sort of thing. Now it's time to take a look at some real-world examples, things that you might actually use in production rather than just examples that don't really do a great deal. First one that we're going to look at is fire. Fire is pretty easy to do using noise. All we're doing is distorting a grid texture. We're taking a grid and using a noise or a turbulence node to actually distort the UVs that feed into the grid. Let's have a look at the render tree. Okay, here we are. We have here a constant shader because fire is an emitter. It doesn't react when you shine light on it. It creates its own light, so there's a constant there. I have a 2D gradient there, and I've set up the gradient so that it grads from red through orange into yellow, and it also has a transparency at the end here where this checker shows through is where the grad is transparent, the rest of it is opaque. And this is a grad which comes from the texture generator submenu because I'm feeding a projection lookup, a UV into there, which I'm distorting using the 3D warp, and the noise coordinate is driven ultimately by a turbulence function down here. I've also added an intensity in there so that I control the intensity of the distortion. The trick, however, and this is what makes it work, is that we're not, as we've done in previous examples, we're not distorting all three UV coordinates according to the RGB of the noise function. We're doing it selectively, and we've used a scalars to vectors node. Scalars to vectors node you'll find in the conversion submenu down here. We're using that to convert to split out the Y and Z. So we're actually only distorting the X, which is ultimately the U. What we want to be able to do is distort it vertically to get those nice flame licks. And a quick look at the turbulence functions there. There's some animations down here, we'll come to that later. We've only really sort of mucked about with it very slightly. I've played around with the frequency sliders in there and left everything else pretty much as it is. Let's have a look and see what it looks like. There it is. That's the effect of the transparency up there. You can see that we've got these nice little licks going up there, and we've got some nice flame shapes down there. And it looks kind of effective. You could probably get it a little better if you wanted to by playing around with the colours, making a better job of it than I've done, but it's not bad. Now the other thing about this is that it animates. This is where the offsets, the Uvw offsets come into play in our turbulence node here. What we're doing is we're animating it in two directions. We're animating it in V, which is vertically, because flames tend to rise up, and we want to get the effect of the flame rising up from its base. And we're also animating it in W. The W direction is actually back into the screen from the camera. The whole function is being passed. The noise is being passed through the grid from front to back. Remember, it's a three-dimensional texture, so here we're only looking at a slice of it. And by animating the W, we can change the slice that we're viewing as it passes through it. It's very effective. It works extremely well. It's also quite nice for doing boiling clouds. Let's take a look in a flipbook and see how that looks when that's animated. Just before we do, just a couple of words about animating these things. There's no hard and fast method for animating these V's and W's, really. It's trial and error. You just have to suck it and see. Try a couple of values for the start and the end position. See how well it animates. If it's too fast, slow it down. If it's too slow, speed it up. And you can only really view the results by doing screen grabs of the animation up here. Anyway, let's take a look at the animation. This is a screen grabbed animation. And there it is. I've just captured it directly from the screen. Let's play it. And there we go. You can see you're getting a really nice flamey sort of effect in there, and the vertical animation that we've put there is helping to give the effect of this rising up to the top. It's a pretty fair representation of fire. I wouldn't call it photoreal by any standards, but if you're doing games work or if you just want a little flame or torch or something in the background, it kind of works pretty well. So that's fire. Let's move on to the next onto the next example. This will be marbles. I've got a number of examples here that use a number of techniques and little tricks. Let's open up the first one. Now this one doesn't use our noise and turbulence functions at all. In fact, it uses the built-in cloud one, and it's rather a lovely texture actually. There. We're distorting a grad, in fact, and we'll look at that in some detail, but we're getting these lovely kind of curly circular things going on here, which I really quite like. Let's have a look at this render tree. Okay, quite a big one this. We're starting off, we've got a Lambert shader there, obviously. Now, we're doing something slightly different to what we've looked at so far here. What we're doing is we're using a cloud. There's the cloud node there, and we're using it to modify the position values of the gradient. The position values here are the positions of these sliders, position of these color sliders here, or color points here, moving these around. You'll notice if I move this around now, it has absolutely no effect on the image there. That's because it's being driven by the cloud function there. It goes into a color to scalar, and we've put it through 3 change range nodes here and plug them into the first 3 colors of the gradient there, and they're messing them about there. This is quite tricky to get this right. This is a method that I played around with first of all when I was trying to do marbles and stuff, and I stumbled upon this one by luck. No more. There's no skill involved in getting this texture. It is tricky to try and figure out what kind of ranges you need. In this case, I've remapped ranges from 0 to 1 into, for the first scalar here, they're going out in the range minus 0.5 to 0.5. In the second one, minus 0.4 to 1, and in the third one, 0.5 to 1.5. There's no, as far as I can see, reason for those values in there. You just got to suck it and see, play with them and see how they work out. And again, we've used the cloud there rather than the turbulence function, simply because it just kind of worked quite well. So that's the first marble example. I wouldn't necessarily call it a marble, but it's kind of close to it, and it looks pretty good. Let's have a look at the second example, which is a variant on this, quite an interesting variant. Open it up, and there it is there. And now let's have a look at its preview. And moving a little bit closer so we can see it more closely. There. Okay. You can see some similarities between this one and the last one. But it's more natural looking. You're starting to see sort of oily, swirly kind of things going on in here. That's a very rich texture. That's absolutely lovely. Let's have a look at its render tree. Okay. Now, it's exactly the same as the previous render tree. We have, bear with me while I just tidy this up a little bit. We have a cloud. Ignore those for the moment. We've got a cloud which is going through a color to scalar and into 3 change ranges. The ranges are exactly the same as in the previous example, and they're being used to modify the color positions of a gradient. So what's different about it? Well, the trick is that we've taken another cloud, pushed it through a color to scalar and a change range here, and put it into the frequency multiplier of our original cloud in here. And what it's doing is it's modifying the frequency multiplier on a per pixel basis, and it's just giving an extra little bit of distortion, which is giving us all this richness here. That's quite a useful little trick. You can do that with the noise and the turbulence functions as well, as we'll see later, and get some pretty good textures in there. It is only monochrome. If you want to change it into color, then change the colours in here. There's no point in trying to change these positions because, as we've said, they're being driven by these values down here, but you can certainly change the colour there and get some nice sort of marbly, stony or oily type textures in there. So that's a variant on that. Okay, let's have a look at another one. 3 here. Okay. Now this one we've managed to lose the slight gritty sort of effect. Again, it's quite a rich texture here, quite natural looking. Granite paving, anything like that. It's actually a simpler version of the ones that we've already looked at. Here we've thrown away the grad completely, and we're just using a cloud through a change range to modify the frequency multiplier, the change range in there, so that we've got a little bit of control over how much. If we readjust these values, you'll see some whoops, fairly dramatic. If I bring that back to 1 and completely unremap it, you can see you're getting quite subtle changes in there. The cloud itself, we can use the cloud to play with the colour here. There's very, very slight differences between the two colours because it's a nice soft sort of effect. You can change the colour there and that will affect the colouring and the texture. So you do have some control there. So that's our third example. Let's see how we can colour that. We've got a fairly gaudy looking texture in here. There. Yeah, I did tell you it was gaudy, didn't I? Okay, let's just run it course. Okay, much the same sort of patterns in there as the last one. Let's see what we've done with it in the render tree. Okay, this time round, this is a variant on the previous texture where we're not using, we're not changing the colour positions of a grad texture. We're using it as a lookup table. So we have, as we had before, a cloud texture with its frequency multiplier being driven by another cloud texture with a little bit of tweaking through the change range node there. But what we've done is we've plugged it into a 2D gradient, input, and we're using that gradient as a lookup table. If you remember, in one of the previous videos, we picked the gradient out of the texture generators submenu. And we're using that, and we've put a fairly garish range of colours in there. I make no excuses for that at all. It's purely to illustrate the point. So we've got some quite good control over colour in there. So that's the colour example. Okay, what else have we got in here? We have another marble base. Okay. Again, it's a monochrome. You can feed that into a grad input and use that as a lookup table to change the colour on this if you want to. But look at that, lots of variation right across there. Some very interesting things going on there. Quite natural looking thing. Let's have a look at its render tree. And in this case, we've done with turbulence nodes what we did before with the cloud nodes, where we're using one turbulence function to drive the parameters of a second turbulence function. So here's our turbulence function there, plugged into the diffuser Lambert shader, our generator up there. And we've used a second turbulence function to drive the frequencies. And what we're doing is we're changing the frequency values of this turbulence function on a pixel per pixel basis across the texture there, and that's the effect that you get. If I unplug this here, there, okay, you can see something resembling a turbulence in there that's coming purely from this node here. The frequency is still being driven by this. I won't unplug that for now. And as soon as we put that in there, you can see it shifting the frequency, varying the frequency across the surface to get these lovely rich effects here. And again, as I said, if you want to play around with the colours on that, then just feed the output of this directly into the input of a grad node from the texture generator submenu, and you can get some great marbly looking colours in there. Great for doing stonework, that. And one final one here. There. And this is really no more than a variation on the previous one that we looked at, just to show the differences that you can get by playing around with the parameters of these two noise functions. I can't for the life of me remember what I did with those, but if you play with them, you'll probably find that it's the frequencies that have been changed. Oh, in fact, no, I tell a lie. It's a noise. We're using noise rather than turbulence here, and just to show that you can still get quite good effects by playing with these things. And you can see what happens as I play around with the frequencies. You can, and of course, another lie. I've plugged it into the offset rather than in the frequencies, but you can plug it into the frequencies here and get some interesting kind of results. Let's see what happens, just for the hell of it. It really is worth. There we go. Slightly different there. It really is worth just trying to plug things in. Don't be put off by the complexity or the number of parameters that are in here. A lot of the textures that you've been looking at, I've got simply by randomly trying to plug things into other things to see what happens. It really pays off, and you can get some unexpected results. Some of them look bloody awful, but others really can look quite spectacular. Just one final example to go back to the fire example that we looked at earlier, and again to show you how varied how much you can vary these things just by pulling a few parameters around. There's our fire, and again going up into the render tree and taking a look at our turbulence function there, just to show you how wide a variance you can get with these functions just by playing around with a few parameters. Playing with the linearity and the gain, if I change the gain here to 4 and bring the linearity down to 1, look at the difference in that texture. Completely different texture in there. That's a really lovely pattern there. That'll animate as well. We've got some animation on there, as with the fire example. Doesn't look like fire at all. I don't know what it looks like, but it is pretty, isn't it? So there we draw to a close the section on noise-based texturing in the render tree. I hope it's been useful.